Welcome to Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson. This is the podcast dedicated to first responder mental health, helping police, fire, EMS, dispatchers, and paramedics create better growth environments for themselves and their teams. Let's get started.
Hi, guys, and welcome to our second part of our interview. Kevin Gilmartin is here. We've been talking a lot about wellness. We've talked about leadership. We talked about diabetes. One thing I want to finish off from our last conversation is that one of the misconceptions that I hear from many people, including police, I can only get diabetes if it's because I'm having, bad food. And if I eat right, I'll be fine. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not how that works. And most people get up my ass about it, but maybe you could help. Maybe you're a former cop, so maybe you'll have more value than what I fucking say.
Well, let me tell you, donuts have taken a bad rap.
Exactly. They have.
It's always been built in, the old power rings, the donuts. That's why cops gain 50 pounds. No, it's not. Don't get me wrong. The nutritional issues of cops suck. They're terrible. You're eating fast food. You're eating at odd hours. But what happens is the cop loses. First of all, the cop doesn't have knowledge of what's going on biologically with them, and that's part of the wellness training. You wouldn't teach cops on the range how to not clear a malfunction. The guy has a malfunction. They get a stovepipe on their weapon. They show them how to clear that and get back in the fight. But we don't show them how do you undo the damage that officer safety has caused to your metabolic health. Mm-hmm. And it's terribly simple. Yeah, we do need better nutrition, absolutely. But we need to have cops in the gym undoing the damage that all this adrenaline and cortisol has caused. Research is absolutely clear. A lot of it comes out of Boston. And we know, for example, if a cop walks on a treadmill, or anybody walks on a treadmill briskly for 20 minutes a day, it treats depression as effectively as antidepressant medication and counseling. So it shouldn't be an option that cops exercise. It should be mandated. And this is where leadership comes in. And I love when I speak to chiefs and they say, our cops can exercise on duty, call load permitting. I said, Chief, when is call load ever permitting? You're down 20% of your officers. Your calls are stacked. The officers are working. Now, I'm not talking about call load permitting. I'm talking about mandatory, at least a half hour of mandatory physical fitness every single day. You don't clear. And the way out of the department is through the gym. And that's part of your work day, and you're compensated for it. And if in fact something happens in the gym, that's a work-related injury. And so right. we have all of these. It's okay to have the police officer have a heart attack, have a stroke, or develop type 2 diabetes, but it's not okay if they pull a muscle doing some weight work. And I go to stress conferences, law enforcement stress conferences, and I see the chaplains, I see the therapists, I see the psychologist, but I very rarely see the physical fitness coordinators. And they're the major, most underappreciated linchpin in this whole movement if we're going to get good, effective cops out doing the job. There's two red flags to me when a cop isn't doing well. The first is, as we mentioned earlier, sleep. Has your sleep pattern changed since you became a cop? And the second red flag is, has your waist size increased? You've been on the job 10 years. Can you wear the uniform you graduated from the police academy in? If you're sleeping 7 to 8 hours a day and you could fit in the uniform you wore at graduation from the police academy, you're probably taking care of yourself. If you've gained 15, 20 pounds in those 10 years and you're sleeping 4 to 6 hours a night, you're not doing well. That is a red flag. And you can use all the denial you want about it, but things aren't working for you, and you will pay the price for that. Not when you're 35, but clearly when you're 55, you will.
Well, there's two things I want to go there. It's not that health stuff is so important. And I tell people you want to avoid seeing me regularly. I'm not saying that mental health is not important, but work out, and there's a good chance that this is going to significantly decrease if you need me at all. I do believe in wellness visits. Don't get me wrong. Once again,
Absolutely.
the checkup from the neck up is essential. But sometimes
I'm
people
not
don't need.
minimizing that at all, Steve.
Oh, no, 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 no. I know you're not. I
Yes,
was just, this is
sure.
not what you said. I was just, because remember, like, again, thank you, audience. If you want to write me a letter, go ahead. Sometimes my audience misinterprets things. Write all the letters you want. I don't care. That's why I wanted to make sure we said that. Not because of you, just because they needed to hear it.
Oh, they're writing a letter. That means they're listening, and that's half the battle,
Because I've had those, like, so you think we're all crazy? No, that's not what I said. You misinterpreted what was said. So now I just try to do it right away. And I like your two red flags, the sleep and the waist side increasing. That's absolutely good signs. And when I talk about sleep hygiene, I get these like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I can save your career by just giving you good sleep hygiene. Add some exercise. You probably won't need me that much.
Well, I've had lots and lots of cops sent to me over the last 40, 50 years for fitness for duty evaluations. They're a little overly exuberant on an arrest, or maybe we have a little kind of domestic issue at home that had a physical component to it. And they want to know how to assess for anger management deficiencies. And I'll say, Chief, your cop doesn't have an anger issue. He has an undiagnosed sleep disorder. And we need to start addressing that. You can't just have the cops say, I go to sleep when I get tired, because you won't get tired. You've learned to override your body's thermostat of fatigue. You don't have a metric to realize you're tired. And I always think of my own life. On September 11th, 2001, I was with the Boca Raton, Florida Police Department. We were talking with their SWAT team, and everybody's pager went off. And everybody had to deploy in the police department, deploy their officers. And my pager went off, and I was being called by the Department of Justice to ask if I could get to New York. I said, okay, I'll hop a plane. They said, there's no planes. All planes are being grounded. Do you have a rental car? I said, yes, I do. It will just head up here. They told me where we were going to be meeting at which hotel, right on the New Jersey side of the tunnels. So I started from Boca Raton, Florida. I got in the car. I started driving towards New York on 9/11. I made it all the way to New York, which is virtually a very abnormal act to be able to do. That must be 1,000 miles. I don't know how far it is.
Yeah, it's a good ride.
And that was because I was a lot younger then, but it was also because my police career was in my rearview mirror very recently. And the capacity to stay awake for that length of time is evidence of a sleep disorder. It's not a strength, it's a liability. When I'm teaching a class and there's some guy in the back of the room and he falls asleep, and somebody says, that you ought to address that guy sleeping in the back of the room, I say, he's doing exactly what his body demands that he does. He worked midnights. The poor guy ought to be asleep right now. We should be teaching this class at midnight to accommodate his biological clock. And we ignore that. But sleep is terribly important. But overall wellness, getting in the gym. I remember they used to have signs in the gyms all over the Marine Corps bases. It would say, the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. And that made good sense. It made really, really good sense. And I look at cops today. We graduated from the police academy, or not just today, we always have. They're lean, they're mean, they're knocking out 50 push-ups. They can run a 10K. Then you come back 18 years later, and 5 push-ups would put them in the cardiac care unit.
Right.
And we don't see that as a big glaring flag being waved in front of us.
And I don't know why we don't see that as a problem.
Well, we have our preconceived notions. It's all the donuts.
No,
it's
but
not the adrenaline, it's the donuts. Sure.
Okay. So let me be again. I'm going to toss a grenade here, as I call it. Well, they signed up for this after all, so it's on them, right?
Yeah, they signed up assuming they would have leadership, not bosses. They would
Yeah.
have people who are going to pave the way for them and mentor them, lead them. And again, with leadership, you have a vision to run your agency, and you have to put that vision through to the implementers, the cops, the rank and file. Well, if you're not taking care of them, they're not going to take care of you. And it's I don't know how many times I've been to a police department over the years that there's a vote of no confidence going on the chief or the sheriff or whoever the head of the agency is. And all that vote of no confidence is just a measurement of the anger and lack of mental health within the rank and file. It's and sometimes there's jerks that are chiefs that need to be removed, but even the best chief, if they're not taking care of mental health of their personnel, they're going to pay the price for it. But I look, I guess I have this vision. Young man, young woman signs up, becomes a cop. And when I speak at the police academies for recruits, and I've been doing this for so many, many years, I walk away with a worry. It's like, I hope this young man or this young woman who's standing in front of me at 23, 24, I hope they're still as intact at 33, 34, 43, 44, 53, 54. And I know a great number of them will not be.
Right.
And we really want them to have a rich, full life, serve the community for their 25, 30 years, whatever it is, but then pull the pin, retire, and collect that pension that they've earned, and then do the things that they want to do with their life, the dreams that they have, whatever those are. Whatever those are. If it's riding your Harley up the Pacific Coast Highway, if it's drinking a beer on the beach in Florida, if it's fly fishing in Montana, I don't care. I want you to do those things. And so many older cops can't do those things because they're physically disabled because of the price they paid because of the job, because of lack of mobility, lack of dynamic strength, metabolic illness, heart disease, and we can prevent that.
And I had if someone asked me that question to ask you, so I'm going to go ahead and ask you directly what they said, because thank you for the direct question. But why is retirement emotionally also harder for officers in general?
Well, police work is a pretty heavy investment profession. You give your heart and soul to it, but you give your time to it. And it's very easy over the course of a law enforcement career to become law enforcement centric. Your friends are cops, your social interactions are cops, and you haven't built in any resiliency in the rest of your life. It's painful for me to watch that. A, a lot of cops retire, and if you talk with them about their social contacts, they could tell you the name of every cop in town. They could tell you the name of the prosecutors, the defense attorneys, and even half the gangsters in town. But if you ask them about something that's totally unrelated, they draw up blanks. My wife and I would have barbecues out here in Arizona, and we had our social friends would come. Most of my friends were law enforcement related people, and would have a massive number of people. And a lot of them had nothing to do with law enforcement. And my non-cop friends would come up to me and say, "Hey, Kevin, do your cop friends talk about anything but work, but their job? Do they talk about anything but their job?" I said, no, they pretty much talk about the job. Well, I don't talk about my job. Well, that's because your job sucks. Nobody cares how much lumber they sold at Lumberman's last month. You watch television shows about them. They're not watching television shows about you. And so since it's a total involvement, foot on the accelerator type of life as a cop, then all of a sudden it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's a void. There's this huge hole. The first 6 months after retirement, they're almost like a surreal time for folks. And then it depends on how have you prepared yourself? If you're going to the gym every day while you're a cop, you'll still go to the gym every day when you're retired. If you're playing golf 3 days a week as a cop, you'll play golf 3 days a week into retirement. But so many cops, they use their sense of time is, they tell you what they used to do for about the first 10 or 15 years of their career. They used to go to the gym. They used to go hiking. They used to go fishing. Everything's in the past tense. Then after about 10 or 15 years, they tell you what they're going to do. When I retire, I'm going to do this. I said, well, instead of telling me that you're going to go fishing when you retire, why don't you go fishing today? Why don't you go to the gym today? Let's not keep let's just live in the moment. And I think that, we interviewed cops, had an extensive interviewed a bunch of cops when they became eligible to retire. It didn't mean they were retiring. It meant they were eligible to retire. They could pull a pin anytime they want. And I would say, you've been on the job 25 years now. You can pull the pin. It's KMA time for you, or you can stay longer if you'd like. What's the one lesson that you've learned over this past quarter century? What's your biggest regret that you wish that you knew then what you know now? And by far, the number one regret of retirement eligible police officers was, I wish I had done more in my personal life with my kids. I wish I had spent more time with my family. And they worded it differently, but it was all this sense of lost time. The dates changed, the years changed, but they never learned how to control time. So one of the first things to prepare for retirement starts the day you walk into the police academy, and that's to learn aggressive personal time management, setting specific goals that you define, and then following them through and doing them. Keeping a written calendar, and you and your family, we work around that calendar. Not big stuff, little stuff, but you run the fabric of your life, not the radio doesn't run it. You run your life.
Just a quick break. Guys, I'm going to talk about a new product that I really like. I actually bought one of their hoodies. It was amazing, and I really enjoyed wearing it. This episode is going to be supported by Deemed Fit. Deemed Fit is a first responder-owned activewear and leisure brand. And one thing that I genuinely like about them is that they support different causes. I actually gave a few people I know who work with first responders or nonprofits their name to Deemed Fit, and I know they're talking to them. They do a lot of initiatives and collections that are based on mental health for first responders. And if you go there right now and you buy anything, including the mental health support stuff, use the code RDA15. That's right, RDA15 to get 15% off on any products that you get. Again, it's called RDA15. Go to deemedfit.com, DEEMEDFIT.com, and enjoy 15% off at checkout to save. Now, right back to the episode. Well, I like what you said about when you start the academy, because I talk about that a little bit and people give me the grumble. And then after that, I say, well, 2 years before you retire, you got to start preparing because you're not ready. And they still look at me and they grumble. And once they retire, most of them also go like, that's what you were talking about. I'm like, you damn right, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, you get wisdom as you get older. The only trouble is sometimes you're so beaten up, you can't do anything about it.
But I think that's the hard part, right? To me, it's get civilian friends. You don't need to always talk shop, because what happens with, I don't know, I can only speak intelligently about this area, but what other cops tend to fall in love with when they're working, because they're going to retire, they fall in love with details. So they do their shift and then they go to detail, or they do a detail and they go to a shift, or vice versa. And then they do doubles and they get the overtime. And suddenly they're 25 years in. They don't know their kids. They don't know their wife. Now they have the money, but they didn't even enjoy it once. Now they're 55, can't walk, and they're fucked up in the head.
Yeah, they've worked all those details, so they got to pay their federal income tax so they can support a Somali daycare center. That's a good deal. I mean, that's a heck of a deal right there. Give me time, don't give me money.
The good one.
Massachusetts, your home state, is one of the worst in terms of the detail. And if you think about it, I can remember talking to a young cop on the Cape years ago, and he came up to me and said, "Doc, do you know how many details I worked last month?" I said, "I have no idea." He said, 30. I said, "How can you possibly work 30 details? There's only 30 days in the month." He said, "Well, we have to be off the books for 8 hours every day and show that. He said, but on my days off, I'll work 2 shifts. I'll work 2 details rather. And he went on to explain in depth his details. Now, stop and think. That's a young man with commitment, with dedication, and with a work ethic. Those are the type of people who built our country. Committed, salt of the earth people. But he's killing himself. He's just killing himself. And as I look at it, I'm thinking, why can't we address issues more effectively, especially monetary issues? We don't just talk about physical fitness. We have to talk about monetary fitness also.
Absolutely.
I had a captain came in my office one time. I was about 4 years short of retirement. We were talking. Good guy. And he goes, how are you doing with the deferred compensation program? I said, I don't know what it is. He goes, you don't know what the deferred comp program is? I said, no. He took me by the ear. He marched me down to the human resources section. He signed me up for it. And he said, since you're within so many years of retirement, you can double your contribution. And it was the first time in my career I took a moment to look at all the stuff that I thought was just peripheral bullshit. Okay. I have to go to a retirement seminar about 3 months before I pull the pin. And they bring in someone from county finance. He's talking to all these cynical cops. Most of them were sergeants, but all had at least 25 years on. And he goes, do you know, if you had contributed X amount of dollars for the first 5 years of your career as a young officer, you'd be having, $1.3 million invested right now. And this one sergeant goes, hey, asshole, why didn't you tell us that when we're getting hired, not when we're retiring, when we can't do shit about it? And that some departments now have excellent wellness programs. I go to some police departments. I am so impressed by the financial guidance they have, the experts they bring in to work with the cops. And then you go the next day to a police department that it might as well be 1972.
Yes.
They're as different as night and day.
And I think that that's the other part too, is you face different departments that deal with it differently, right? There's some departments I've heard about deferred comp and they explain everything in great detail, and other places they don't. I think that you talk about the overall wellness of police officers, sheriff, and any LEO, frankly. I think that what we tend to forget is we don't see the person as a whole. And I think that that's the other part I wanted to kind of talk a little bit as we're going to wrap up soon. But people as a whole, because there's a police officer that's a physical person who's also a family person, who's a human being, who happens to be a police officer, who has his mental health issue, has his own history. And I'm not saying that everyone's fucked up. That is not what I'm intending.
No, not at all.
We don't see the whole person. We only see a uniform. We only see, what can you do for me today?
Well, unfortunately, that's how the cop many times sees themselves. They don't say, I work as a cop. Many times they say, I am a cop. And a lot of times that has to do with, again, to the time element and getting off duty in this exhausted parasympathetic state where they disengage. They become ayustas. I compare it to firefighters who have compressed shifts. They'll work. Well, I shouldn't say work. They're firefighters, but they're
I was going to make a joke too about that. There's
24-hour shifts are the minimum. And so they're there. So, the different Kelly type of shifts, they'll have a day or two on and 3 or 4 days off. And I don't know a single firefighter that's not competent in some other skill. They're great firefighters, but they're also can lay tile. They can also repair a car. They can also do electrical work. The cops I know are great cops, but they supplement their income by working details, by working overtime. So as the years progress through the career of a firefighter, they become more competent in a diversity of skill sets, whereas the cop becomes highly competent in one skill set. Then they retire and that skill set is taken away. Whereas the firefighter who's been laying tile just lays a few more tile jobs, or they put another roof on. And the firefighter's not constantly pumping adrenaline like the cop is. Even when the cop is just on patrol and not engaged in a call, they're in that hypervigilance state, kicking out cortisol. The firefighter is back at the firehouse lifting weights and cooking chili or something. They'll risk their lives to save my family when the bell goes off. But until the bell goes off, they're in the green zone. They're chilling, they're kicking back. So they're not constantly kicking out cortisol, and they're not constantly putting glucose into the fat cell around the abdominal area. That's why women buy calendars of firefighters. They don't buy calendars of cops with their shirts off. I always like to say, what would you call a calendar of cops? Badges and bellies, that's
Badges and
that weight around the abdominal area that firefighters, by and large, are far fitter, far leaner.
And we joked around about having more time. I would also argue, and I mean, they're going to go too long on this, but sometimes firefighters have too much time at the station. So not only do they work out, no, they start gossiping. They start like doing all the extracurricular. But that's a different story for a different day, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Idleness is the devil's workshop. That's why fire unions are far more effective than police unions. They have far better benefits. There's one other thing I want to add here, though, that I think is critical to the policing issue in the United States, and that's the absence of sabbaticals for police officers. If I'm a police officer in Canada, if I'm a police officer in Australia or New Zealand, I have the capacity to enter a program where I will put a percentage of my salary into a defer, like an escrow account. And let's say after every fourth year of full service, I can take a year off compensated. We don't even think about doing that in the United States. And if I'm teaching freshman psychology, I'll get a sabbatical after about 6 or 7 years. So I can go write a book or travel. Trust me, teaching freshman psychology is a whole lot less stressful than working fatal car accidents. So I think going back to the question of unions, our unions need to start fighting for some things that'll keep their brother or sister members alive. Mandatory physical fitness, mandatory annual physicals so we can prevent diseases that are coming around, and sabbaticals. And at that point, then we're really taking care of our rank and file personnel.
And I know that, around here in Providence, Rhode Island, they're the ones who started the whole let's get some cancer screenings done at the station versus counting on people to go see a doctor. And that was innovative. Now it's been replicated and people love it. That's why, like, part of me also wonders about wellness visits. You can't do those on site, in my experience, because then it becomes a little less trustworthy for some people, because why are you sitting next to the chief's office or whatever? But at the same time, it's the same. I think that finding ways to get the mental health wellness visits as important as any other physical health issue would be.
Absolutely. And I'll put the burden on the mental health practitioners. We talked about cultural competency. I really think the therapist, the clinician, needs to be in the patrol car on occasion. They need to see the world through a cop's windshield and not sitting in their office. And I find that helps develop that sense of cultural appreciation, not this mutual stereotyping that all cops are this way or all therapists are that way. They can see the world that this young man or this young woman have to deal with every day.
If you don't do a ride along, you are not going to be culturally competent. If you never sit around the firehouse table, you will never be culturally competent.
Absolutely.
And if you've never been to like any type of roll call dispatch or any type of in office also, you will not be competent.
Absolutely.
My experience.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with it than that.
Like I've done all of those. Dad taught me more than any book I ever read.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important.
Terribly important to have culturally competent clinicians.
Well, we're working on it here in Massachusetts with Behind the Badge and beyond here, but we'll continue working on it diligently, because to me, what you just said today was so important in so many ways. The wellness of our police officers start on the day they go to their training and they do their camp. And then after boot camp, continuously doing those things like walking for 20 minutes on the treadmill, taking care of their family, their neighbors, and other people that outside of work, so that they can balance out their whole health system.
It's amazing to me to watch. I have some very intense hobbies that I like. One is fly fishing. And I was standing in a river in Oregon, fly fishing once about 5 years ago. It was long summer day that was ending. It was about 9:30 at night. It was getting too dark to see my fly, but I'm hearing some voice down the river. I can't see, there's nobody around. Must be another angler down the way. I walk out and I have maybe a mile walk back to my pickup, and I run into another fella. I said, "Oh," and we start talking, and I find out that he's a cop. I said, "Oh," I said, "You out here fishing?" He said, "No, I run a trauma group out here." I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I have a trauma group, and it's peer support driven. It There are cops, firefighters, dispatchers who join a group. This was in Bend, Oregon, and they called it the Tight Blue Lines. You can Google that and Tight Blue Lines, and they get together and they live in the moment. They learn to fly fish, and they get to put not thinking about the calls, not thinking about the trauma, not thinking about all the drama at work. They're just watching a dry fly, picking up a fish here and there, and living in the moment. And to me, that's the essence. Peer support, living in the moment, having rich, full lives. They're great cops, but now they're becoming great fly fishermen, having that bifurcation.
I mean, I wrote it down, tight blue lines. I mean, there's something for veterans that's similar that I work with around here, which is rifles to rods, where basically they take out the veterans for fishing. There's no like pressure. There's no converse. You want to talk, you don't talk. You want to talk the whole time, you talk the whole time.
Yeah, the Healing Waters program, terribly important. Absolutely.
And
it's that holistic type of approach to law enforcement that we have to start getting into.
And that's why, like, for my group, sometimes like we did this in December. We went to someone's house and around the fire pit, and we ended up spending a couple hours just chit-chatting there. And someone said to me, "How is that a group?" I said, "Other than the firefighters started hanging out with the firefighters and the police hanging out with the police, the other immense part is that they all sat, laughed, left. Everyone had their phone number, and now they have friends outside of their work environment that are there."
Absolutely. That's so important. Building resiliency.
Yeah, I'm not like people like, "Oh, what type of therapy do you do?" My therapy doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It's the support they get to each other. That's why I run that group.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, 100%.
I'll throw in a couple of things. There's a long running joke about me being a French maid, but if you want to know more, just write to me. But you just run with it, and it's so much more fun because guys we talked one day about a police officer who unfortunately passed away around here due to a vehicle accident. And then we talked about someone growing up with abuse. And then the next session, we ended up laughing about an incident that occurred at a wrestling event around here. It happened to be midgets. And we had a 40-minute laughter about that. And people were like, "How is that therapy?" I said, "They all trust each other."
Yeah.
They all trust me, even though I'm a civilian. So I like that.
Well, that having a sense of community is terribly important. Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up here, where can we find you? I know I found you through your website, but
well, I think I guess you could look my name up on the internet and read some of the things we've published. You could read our book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. I'll go ahead and send you a link if any of your listeners would like to look at the book. That outlines pretty much everything we spoke about today. We wrote that book in 2002, and it's been revised about 9 times. The last one the new one came out last year, and it looks at this whole journey through law enforcement. It's applicable, I think, to fire, but I have to let the firefighters determine that. I don't have the expertise in that field.
Having read the book,
it's helpful.
Having read the revised book, I haven't read the one from a year ago. You're costing me a lot of money here, Kevin.
Not really.
I got to buy a new one.
We keep the price of that book pretty cheap.
I know. It's really good.
It was a labor of love, not a monetary gain.
I hope people go grab it, and I definitely will be grabbing the new, send me the link. I'll put it in the show notes. And truly, the people who have listened to this podcast for almost 5 years know I don't lie. I've read that book at least twice, if not 3 times. One of them I might have cheated, not read the whole thing. It is highly recommended for police officers, fire can get something out of it, but it really, like any LEO type of guy, I think goes a lot better for them.
If there's any big words in there that the firefighter doesn't understand, they could just ask the local cop and he'll explain what the word means. I'll tell you a funny story about that book. No, in the wintertime, I'm being driven out to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, where they train the highway patrol officers, state patrol officers. Middle of the night, it's like 2 a.m. I have a car driving me out there, and we run into a deer, smashes the entire car. The driver's injured, not severely, broke his arm, and I'm in the back seat. The airbags deploy. So hit 911, troopers show up. They have to euthanize the deer. They get an ambulance to chart off the driver. And the trooper says he's going to wait with me there at the side of the highway because of the late hour and the remoteness of the location. And he asked me, why am I going to Camp McCoy? I said, I'm going to teach a class for your outfit, the State Patrol. He said, what are you going to teach? I said, I'm going to teach a class called Emotional Survival. And he goes, oh, like that asshole Gilmartin. and so I said, I'm Gilmartin. So he goes, hang on a second. So he runs back to his patrol car and he goes back with a battered copy of the book with little stickets and Post-its on all these pages. He said, I had a question for you on page 182. I was going to send you an email about it. I said, I don't know what's on page 182, but the next time you want to talk to me, just send the email. Don't send the deer, okay? I'll always remember that.
Yeah, don't send the deer.
Nowhere, and the guy produces that book. So we're very happy that with the footprint the book has found and the impact it in people's lives. So that's what it was written for. So I hope your readers do take a look or borrow one, steal one, get one somewhere. Just read it and discuss the information with your loved ones.
If you're my client, I have like 2 versions here already. And if you're not one of my clients, go buy it we're going to get a link for you to go get it so that Kevin will send that. And from the bottom of my heart, I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope we stay in touch. This was an amazing conversation. I hope people listen to this, go get your book. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steve. Take care. Keep up the good work.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.